Good evening. You're listening live to the Xtreme Movie Show, Xtreme TV version. Tonight, from the Pine Hills Palace just west of Orlando, Florida, it's The Boys on Buffy, Season 1, Episode 9 and 10. And gentlemen, I'm going to say we had a little Father's Day special last week, so we're back on the Buffy, and Buffy's never felt better than ever. Episode 9, we're dealing with killer dolls is the way I look at it, which has the best scene I've seen so far in all of Buffy up to this point here too. But let's go around the horn and just get some quick impressions on what we had there. Professor Pixel, what was your initial impression about this episode?
I thought it was going to be pretty run-of-the-mill. A haunted dummy is something very, very simple. There's a bad spirit in there. It's going to try and kill everybody. You break it, spirit's released, end of the day, hands clean. It was not like that at all.
You're absolutely right. But wait, there's more. It's not just a killer doll. Excuse me, ventriloquist for the professionals out there. Yeah, it's definitely got a little more meat on the bone or in the wood. I don't know what you'd say to this too, but RDV, what about you? What are your initial thoughts?
Well, this is actually very as dumb as this episode was. It introduces a new character, a character who could be actually turn out to be a villain. We don't know. It could just be just a stick in the mud, or it could be actually something more. But we introduced to Principal Snyder, who is an absolute Nazi.
It's so over the top the way he is. It's so unbelievable. It really almost makes you break the magic of just going, okay, this is the Buffy verse. This is how it works. But I think you bring up a very interesting point. Okay, he is the new replacement because they whacked the other one for whatever reason. Don't know if that was a casting thing behind the scenes or if that was just the way it is. But I think that's a good point. Dalton, you weren't able to get with us 2 weeks ago, I think, with some technical issues. I'm glad you're back. What were your initial thoughts on this episode?
Like RDV, I mostly focused on the fact that this was the introduction of the asshole principal, because of course adults, aside from Giles, can't be both nice and competent. We can't have that, because then things might actually be resolved for 5 freaking minutes. But yeah, he's basically like Principal Trunchbull from Matilda's fraternal twin there.
Yeah, so the gang is kind of...
The Scooby Gang.
I don't call them that.
They call themselves that. You have to know.
They don't that yet.
They call
in
themselves
the show.
That.
Okay, then. So we'll wait till it's official. So there's some interesting points you guys had there, but one of the things is obviously with this new principal, you get that impression that like, wow, this guy's going to be stiff. And, the guy's so over the top about it, but he's this little Weasley looking fellow. It kind of basically strong arms him to having to get into the talent show. And of course what we see in the talent show that's always interesting, like with a sporting event, is when you see a collection of everybody at the school, because it's an obvious built-in excuse for how to show stuff. Of course, unless people magically are all in the same class and something's going on. But I was kind of like, until I saw the guy with the ventriloquist and dummy, because the interesting thing about it is you're like, you expect people not necessarily to be good, and you see this happening, but then this guy is so bad with this doll, but then all of a sudden he gets really, really good. Everyone starts freaking out, and you're like, uh-oh, this is what it's going to be about. But Pixel, back to your whole point about this, there's a lot more meat on the bone to this here too. I thought that was very surprising, but it's kind of disgusting when they talk about organ harvesting with brains and hearts and stuff like that. I mean, that had to be a surprise for you.
Yeah, and the watching the students that did get picked off one by one, I kept being surprised throughout, as leading up to, should I just go ahead and say what the big reveal was for the dummy?
Yeah.
Rip the Band-Aid off, man.
The dummy, whose name is Sid, is not the one collecting these parts, not collecting the brain, the heart, all the organs that it needs to live again. It's in fact a demon hunter who is hunting the demon that is stealing the parts.
What the best part is, before they even found us out, remember Xander was supposed to watch him in the library. He's doing his homework.
Yes.
And all of a sudden he's like, ah! And they're like, what? Like the dummy's on, they're all freaking out. Look at all the dummy is now. He's just...
Yeah, because for a few episodes now, Xander's not really got on my nerves too much. And when I say he's a little bit of a jerk, he should go heel just a little bit, be that tweener kind. He's really good. When he's the dopey high school kid, it just makes me cringe and hate this show. But to your point, he's legitimately creeped out by Sid. And it was kind of funny, his reaction, and I give him credit, the actor, for that too, because it was mildly entertaining. And yeah, there was actually a lot in this episode too. So to me, Dalton, we've talked about trying to have some of the occult rules that the first few episodes up to now are kind of establishing in the Buffyverse, and whether they're consistent or not, we'll find out. But we haven't really talked about devils per se. It's always been demons and stuff. So what do you think about the way they're trying to set this up here with Sid the dummy, ventriloquism, demon hunter? But then they throw in some backstory there about the Brotherhood of the Seven, and they've got to do all this harvesting, and that's why. I mean, did you like this? Did you think it was silly? What?
It's nice to see a haunted doll character that's not, mustache twirlingly evil. Because for one thing, I've always found ventriloquist dummies fascinating, and I've always wanted one because I collect antiques, and I have for pretty much my whole life. And I've never understood this weird thing people have with ventriloquist dummies. Like, why do people get so creeped out by them? I don't really get it. And it's just nice to have one where it's like, no, I'm not mustache twirlingly evil just because I'm a ventriloquist dummy. I might be the good guy, dang it.
Didn't you grow up reading R.L. Stein books? And they had what was one of the
yes,
books?
But that was mostly due to people who have no idea what they're doing with magic, fucking around with magic, as is often the case in such supernatural horror books. Somebody finds a book or an artifact or something that says do not read or do not touch on it, and what do they do in the first 5 minutes? Ooh, I wonder what this is. And then things go wrong because they don't know what they're doing.
I'm in an antique shop. I touch everything.
Humans are the most scary and terrifying things in those stories, for the record. If you would just follow the simple instruction of do not mess with this thing, 99% of horror scenarios could be avoided.
As one of those people who do get really creeped out by ventriloquist dummies, let me tell you, they are unsettling. Just looking at them it's not like a puppet that's made out of foam. It's this hard wooden thing with dead eyes that do not. If they blink, it's even worse. Honestly,
they watch you as you walk through the room at night.
That's what it feels like they do. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's the expressionless features and the fact that it's not something you can throw and your dog's going to go fetch for you and tear up or whatever. It'd probably be creeped out by it too. And growing up, never knew anybody that had it. Knew maybe one or two people that might have been interested in magic, but it was always the silly, watch the coin disappear from one hand to the other. Oh, let me pull it from your ear kind of nonsense stuff that, I mean, look, magic's kind of cool, but let's be honest, at least growing up back in the day, if you did any sort of magic at all, you got pummeled, and it's just kind of how it was. So God forbid anybody actually carried around a suitcase with a ventriloquist doll in it. But, that does bring us to the scene kind of that I was thinking about when I was watching this, because with Buffy, she starts off as bubblegum chewing girl who's kind of entitled, and I'd mentioned the fact that I'd kind of like the whole gang aspect of them kind of doing stuff and people having roles, especially Willow being the smart one, and Giles being the mentor I like. But Xander hasn't been too bad, but Buffy's been my least favorite. But in here, and you see over the past couple episodes where she's actually having a bit of a relationship with her mom doesn't seem too bad or too cringy. And she seems almost human in this episode where she's going to bed at night and all of a sudden there's that flash of lightning or whatever. And you just see the doll's head outside.
I know, it's like
in the corner because she knew it was going to happen.
And it screams across the
showed it, and it's still delivered. Best scene so far. I was howling over this.
Almost as bad as, speaking of haunted dolls, The Boy. You remember?
Yes. Yes.
You lost your absolute shit on that movie more than I've ever seen you laugh ever.
Well, Brahms 2 will be probably reviewed at some point here soon. Just to
Oh,
kind of
God.
continue the pain.
But getting back to Buffy though, this was kind of a weird episode. It's like this is another one, just like The Witch. There's a plot twist.
Yes.
And I think that's what kind of helped us out, but it's not as cool as the first one. The Witch episode 3.
When they turn to each other and they're both saying, "You're never going to get the heart in the brain. You'll never be human," and then they just stare at each other for a minute and say, "What?"
Did he also make Kevin? He's like, "Well, we know this guy's not a candidate, Xander."
Well, there was a weird scene where, that I thought was kind of neat because the reveal for this doesn't happen at the end of the episode. I mean, there's still a good 5-10 minutes at least left in there where, like in the third act, the doll becomes like a part of the gang in a way where he's actually like sitting having a conversation.
Yeah,
rafters. And I'm like, he's got the old soul and they're talking a little bit, and it's kind of stupid and silly, but in a way it works because I think he made a comment there too about stuff which gives you a quick look at that fact that there's a lot of stuff going on that's not just right here in this high school in this present day and time. This whole demon spirit thing's just not a one-off. There's a whole legacy behind it, and it's all that stuff that we haven't gotten the full effect of yet 9 episodes in. And I like when they tease and stretch that out a little bit.
Well, not only is he's an old soul in there, but he's still a pervy soul. He's like, it turns out he's like, "You want to hold me?" It's in your lap.
That's true.
That whole horny dummy act isn't an act, is it? Nope.
And he kind of just like, he's because his eyes aren't moving and he's shaking his head side to side like, nope. Well, that was kind of funny to me. It's nothing to get triggered about it, but overall, I think the episode was good, and the whole thing too here is the fact that they had a little bit of not necessarily backstory, but a little bit of, like I say, stuff that they wanted to emphasize that goes on in the world of Buffy that's just now getting exposed. And they mentioned even in that silly scene, and even though you're kind of off put by this dummy and what happens at the end, and the whole silly dumb stuff of the whole talent show at the end is just ridiculous to me, but whatever. It kind of hides the fact that now we've had at least 2 episodes, when we mentioned The Witch earlier, where we can start now as fans watching show go, hey, wait a minute, if the Buffy writers keep this up, that'll be kind of interesting, because sometimes they'll have this monster of the week kind of silly, not too deep of a show, not with all that stuff going on, but then we'll have some here where it's not advancing some meta arc, but it does flesh out a few key items that will be important later on, probably. But just in the fact that we're going to get twists and turns like this. So Killer Doll, you see that in 5 minutes, you think that's going to be the case. No, I think it was very actually smart, and the fact that they had the twist that had all this was very entertaining to me. I liked it a lot. What do you guys think? I mean, where does it rank for you so far?
Well, this episode, I gotta say, as far as it's not the worst, it's right in the middle for me.
I actually do have a fact, I don't know if it's a fun fact, but this is actually the lowest rated episode of the entire series. It only pulled in an audience of 1 million households.
Yeah, I think it was a 2.5 rating. Yeah, well, again, I think Buffy was one of the shows that kind of to grow a little bit, and I'm not sure if there's any events going on at the time or if it was a consistent time slot, so I haven't really looked at that analysis, but you're right, it's kind of low, and I think people are still trying to decide what they want out of the show. Do they want that goofy teenage thing, or do they want the ones that occasionally seem a little bit dark as we get ready to go talk about the next episode? Dalton, did you have any final thoughts?
Just something quick I wanted to mention. I did get a little bit of sadistic schadenfreude myself out of the fact that the stage illusionist ended up being the villain. Because as someone who studied the occult for 14 years, I have grown a visceral hatred for stage illusionists. Hate them all. So there's that.
Interesting.
When he tied Giles, he locked Giles in and he was going to chop off the top of his head, I was just staring. And
Well,
If I
what good's a
only had
talent show if you don't have a
brain.
guillotine and a beheading? I mean, if you're
Yeah.
gonna go that way, go all the way.
There's the trick element to it. And when he looks at him, what trick?
If I only had a brain.
All right, so that brings us to next episode 10, called Nightmares, which is not a double entendre. That's exactly what the show's about. And actually, one of the things about Buffy that to me hasn't happened that much is they really haven't gone very UFO-ish, very mental-ish, except for the little boy and some astral projection stuff. When you think about some of the stuff that is the push behind what happens in this episode, it's actually kind of dark to me. But I like the idea of everybody's got their own kind of inner fears, and something comes and exposes it. You don't know what it is. And, do you have shame about it? Do you deal with it or whatever? But of course, the whole thing starts off, and we know that Buffy has issues with her parents, which there's an interesting scene in here. But of course, a big part of it has to do with the fact that now in episode 10, they've teased us for several episodes. Now they decide to drop the master all over again, because you see him choking her out and you're like, okay, we know this isn't real, but it's kind of one of those things to it. And I will say this, her mom, I don't know what kind of role she may have going forward into this season or future seasons, but she's not horrible. She's not disposable. She's just sort of there. I feel like that's like untapped potential, but seeing the occasional scene with Buffy and her mom, I think's kind of good. And of course, they're getting ready to meet her father. So sometimes these shows get cringy when they try to deal with social things like this into it. But, it is what it is. There are broken homes out there. There are people that have step parents and whatnot too. So it wasn't horrible for me. And frankly, the father's performance was stellar, and it had some merit for what was going on here. So let's go in reverse order. Dalton, what were your initial thoughts about this episode?
I like this episode. It is nice to sort of get into some deepities here, and again, knowing that this was made in 1997, I applaud them trying to address these kind of issues. Mostly, though, I found this episode really funny because I know one of my favorite episodes later on is Once More with Feeling, and they actually sort of make fun of this episode in one of the songs from Once More with Feeling. So it brought a smile to my face to be like, oh yeah, they weren't just pulling something out of their ass with that line. They actually did that episode. Lol.
I see. So did you think that was kind of more of a funny episode, or did you think it was pretty dark? Or, I mean, which way did you take it?
I thought it was done well and done seriously. It's funny to me that they would then take this very serious episode concept and make fun of it later on in what, in all honesty, is probably the most over-the-top episode of Buffy, and given how over-the-top Buffy can be, that's saying something. But yeah,
I see.
Yeah. Nostalgia.
What about you? Go ahead.
Buffy fan, I guess, more than anything.
Yeah, and I'm trying to take that frame that I haven't seen, because I haven't seen the show at all. So this is all new to me. So I'm really trying not to read anything forward about it, not talk to anybody. So I know some of you all have, like I say, some thoughts about it. So it'd be interesting at what point in the future did they start referencing things in the past and either build on or, like you say, make fun of it. Well, go ahead, Doctor.
This is probably my second time watching this episode, but I don't remember even watching the first time. That's how forgettable it was. This was basically a story about abuse, about being a kid being abused by an adult. And I got that point right away when the girl got attacked by the club, and they're like, oh yeah, Billy, there's a kid in the hospital there. He was the first victim. I'm like, oh, this is pay. Then so I was like, I give this a 4 out of 10, man. I knew exactly what's going on, but I mean, just like Xander, I thought Buffy was hot as a vampire.
You thought what?
Buffy was hot as a vampire, just like Xander.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely true.
But
yeah, we're going to talk about the what you said there about the violence part to it, because that really is the episode.
I have one question for you. Do you recognize who the kid plays Billy? Do you know what movie he's from?
Not off the top of my head.
I'll give you a hint. He's in a movie with Pierce Brosnan. It came out and says around this time. And it had a volcano.
Oh, who is it? Tell us.
This is because the kid who plays Graham in Dante's Peak alongside Pierce Brosnan.
Ah, I see.
Yes, that's the. So I knew he looked familiar, and I was like, I looked it up, I'm like, yeah, this is a kid, yeah, because I just watched that movie about a couple months ago.
I got to admit, because it had been a couple weeks since I'd watched some episodes or the episodes we had reviewed covered it. But there's actually two kids in this episode, if I recall. There's the master talking to that little dopey, ugly-looking kid, Colin, and then there's the one that's
Billy,
in the hospital. But yeah, Pixel, what about you? What's going on here with you? How did this strike you?
While I didn't feel about it as harshly as Venkman, I do agree this episode kind of sucked. I get that they wanted to go a serious route, but it doesn't hold up with the rest of the series so far. I just found myself kind of out of it whenever I was watching, and I'd like to give it another chance, see that maybe I missed something. Maybe there is something more to this episode, but I feel like they went serious and they just kind of lost touch.
They wrote a check they couldn't cash, basically.
Well, the dreams didn't really make sense to me. Is like, I guess Jenny has a fear of clowns, but like Willow singing opera, I never got that vibe from her in any other episode. That was
she has stage fright with what that was sort of referring to. She has
actually
a fear of dealing with large amounts of people in general.
Actually, in the previous episode episode 9, at the end, whenever they're performing on stage, Willow runs off stage crying.
Okay.
So it was already alluded to.
Characterization, yay.
Well, the thing about this is I agree that they went dark. I don't mind they did it, but I think the way they did it made it a tough watch because starting off, it's kind of a cool hook. You got this dude who's going to open up his textbook to read, and this is a little unexpected. All these tarantulas come out of it, and it's like, okay, that's kind of badass. That's kind of cool. More spiders are always a good thing like this, right? And then you see a little boy in the doorway, and I'm like, no, that's kind of dopey. So it's automatically I don't like that. And then it's kind of like, all right, what's going on here? And then Giles kind of losing his ability to read, I thought was kind of cool. And then Buffy not being able to take a test. Okay, who cares? Okay, we get what's going on or whatever. So at least it's somewhat kind of like low level, consistently silly without being too dark. And then you get this guy that says Lucky 19. You're like, okay, whatever. I'm not buying what you're selling. And then the worst thing about this whole thing too is that there's this kid that apparently, I guess the Little League baseball coach beat up or slapped or, basically physically abused a kid. He ended up in the hospital, and he's actually projecting or whatever, and he's out, and that's the figure that Buffy's seeing. And so she kind of, goes through and helps them all out. And you're like, okay, I get that this is kind of a dopey show, and I get that, it's got demons and vampires, and we want to mark out for it. We want it to be a little witty. And the last episode, they did a great job of kind of giving us a swerve, even though it's a ventriloquist demon on her doll. That's kind of it was very Buffy-like. Hear them going really, really deep about it with a kid. I thought I liked it, but it seemed like that would have been for a show for X-Files or maybe Millennium, which is a much darker show. It seemed more with the tone for it. And my whole point to it is I think the best scene in here is when Buffy's father comes up. There's no yelling, there's no screaming, there's no whatever, but she's having to talk with the father, and he very kind of calmly lights her up and basically rips her new one, saying, yeah, you're the reason why, and you're tough being around, and you did this and you did that. And she kind of lost, and I thought, this is kind of cool. I liked it, but it was very harsh, but I thought that was done really well. But yeah, it's just the whole other guy, like, running around that you can't see, the ugly dude. It didn't work for me. And her saving the astral projected little kid. That I agree with you guys. While I like the attempt, I appreciate it. I'm glad they tried it. It didn't really work for me either. That being said, I don't think it was horrible.
What really worked for me was the giant murder hornets flying around.
Well, I thought that would have been Buffy coming out as a vampire because she doesn't like being buried alive.
I don't think they explained well enough the reason why either. And it has been a while since I've seen this episode now. But
no, you're right. They just sort of, this is the thing that's happening. We never really fully like. This is the problem of removing the guy who delivered all the exposition from your plot by making him unable to read. Because if this were a usual episode, Giles would have come up with some mystical technobabble, and we would have been off to the races. But he's incapacitated at the moment, so this
That was
is just a
that was
thing,
the
and
coolest
now it's
part
no
of it.
longer a thing, and we're good.
That was
So-
the coolest part of it right there.
So,
The fact that Giles lost the ability to read was so horrible that he was
Well-
running around like a chicken with his head cut off.
what was weird to
I
me
don't
is
blame him.
the beginning with the master. He's talking to the little kid. He's talking about how fear is like their greatest power and
I
stuff.
want
and
to call him
stuff.
the chosen one, but he's the anointed one, and that
Yeah,
bugs
yeah,
me.
yeah.
But yeah.
Anyway, so he's talking to him. I'm like, and then all of a sudden this kid has powers. I'm like, did the master did they cause something, or how? Because I mean, it's just
I think it's implied that the master has been like training him, or
I'm talking about
like,
Billy.
on some
How did
latent
Billy get
potential he
powers?
had, I think was the
Billy's-
implication there.
I'm just saying because Billy is astral projecting himself. They wouldn't explain how everybody else is getting nightmares. It was poor. It's poor in explaining for this episode.
Well, that brings up a question that 10 episodes in now, I think it's really worth it too, because while like we said that there's been some kind of lighthearted fun episodes, like the sexy science teacher, and then there's the one where the hyenas was kind of funny, but then like the last episode had a swerve to it, and so did the witch. So half the episodes have been at least mildly entertaining from I think a writing perspective and a watching pleasurable experience while we're still learning who these characters are. And one thing I will say is, I know some shows are talky, and I know some people like to write lots of dialogue to fill in the blanks and everything instead of showing you stuff. I agree with everything you guys are saying about the show not doing a very good job in this episode of explaining all these little details. Is there too much exposition and not enough showing? Are they trying to do too much? Well, what do we think?
As far as the show doing too much or doing too little,
Well,
for being in the first of its kind. I mean, and then they're called. It's on the WB. They're gonna be campy. They can't be as dark as X-Files or as Millennium on Fox.
right.
It's just aimed towards kids.
Well,
Not
teens,
kids, but
teens and
teenagers.
preteens, yeah.
Teens, yes. Where the other one is aimed kind of towards like X-Files and Millennium is kind of towards adults. Or kids that are people in their 20s.
Yeah.
Maybe if they had given a good reason as to why Billy was causing the nightmares of this town to spark.
My only explanation could be that the Hellmouth increased his power, so it could increase his nightmare, cause other people to have nightmares.
Yeah, still that's not good enough. I'm sorry.
Okay,
You need better
I'm gonna attempt to magic explain this for the sake of my own peace of mind and everyone else's. Potentially, if this is a situation where he didn't have like this sort of power in other circumstances, if the fact that he was in a coma and experienced trauma basically severed the connection between his spirit and his body, sort of forcing his astral projection, then that latent trauma could have caused the extra fear impulse, which could have been amplified by the Hellmouth to give everyone else nightmares. Because the whole way a ghost or a wayward spirit gets created is if your connection between your energy and your body gets severed by trauma, it basically creates a metaphysical stain. And in a location like the Hellmouth, it is possible that that stain could essentially leak onto other people, and then you'd have the situation we're having here. But this is why we need Giles, because I can't be bothered to magic explain these things. He needs to magic explain them in universe.
Well, I think that as well as I do, and I think just to say it out there, being a ghost is much different than being a demon, a devil, wandering spirit, whatever you want to call it. But also is different than the astral projection itself. But that being said, I agree with you. And while I like the fact that Giles has been semi-incapacitated the past 2 episodes, I think we have a handle on what's going on. So I think maybe it was just they could have thrown a few lines in this episode, maybe that would have helped everybody out for understanding what's going on. Because again, if this is going to be, we got 2 more episodes left for the season 1. So after the break of season 1, when they go to renew it for season 2, people are going to be left with certain things on their mind. And I think most people agree that it's a campy show, kind of fun, but they're definitely trying to set up this big universe. And so far, it's been a little hit or miss, in my opinion. And I think when they emphasize the monster of the week and just occasionally some of the group dynamics make us care about the characters. In other words, if they slip in a little bit of the backstory of the town and whatnot, which, again, we'll talk more about that later as we see more episodes. I think that so far for me, that's been the winning formula up till now. Let's go around just for the final thoughts on just Buffy, seasons 1 through 10, these last 2, kind of where we're at overall and everything. Because right now I will say it's slightly better than I thought, but still kind of campy and dopey like I knew it was, which is why I didn't want to watch it. But I've seen worse and I've survived worse. So far, so good for me. I'm actually going, I kind of get what's going on at least a little bit. The Master, is kind of funny and they have enough silly stuff that I've had a chuckle in an episode or 2. So that's not a bad thing. That's pretty good. So Pixel, what about you? Where are we at up to now?
I think, other than episode 10, we really have established that this show, while it is, like you said, silly, dopey, it's not meant to be handled quite as serious as they were going in this last episode. It's still a solid show. And it's really getting to its core here. And I think from here on out, I have to say, it does keep getting better and better.
That's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I would agree with you. I think there's definitely an energy to it. And we'll see how that percolates or whatever. RDV, what about you? How we doing?
On the show, this episode, as far as this, actually, so you said I didn't care for this episode. As far as the rest of the show, I look forward to watching the last 2.
Cool. You think the show to this point's been a success? In other words, like it makes you want to watch more?
It hasn't disappointed me. It's not like I'm trying to watch something that's supposed to be serious, and then it gets to the point where it gets overly serious, and then to the point where it's not fun anymore. This is a lot better than what you're going to see all today. Perfect example, Doom Patrol. I love the first season. I tried to get into the second season, and it's just like one character they put on there just ruined it for me the whole entire show.
Yeah, I think it's a delicate balancing act, trying to make sure the characters have their own personality, but not necessarily too grating, but identifiable each. And let's be honest, Buffy's kind of hot. She's the whole vampire.
Yeah, what really improved this the episode 10 for me was Cordelia's hair and becoming a nerd, going to chess class. Just called.
Yeah, she's the queen bee, no doubt about it.
That was hilarious. It's like
very glossy looking.
Of course, that would be her nightmare, becoming a nerd.
Fuck up, bitch.
I love the fact that Xander Will just kind of look at it like, haha.
Grow a pair, Xander. Yeah, Xander hasn't upset me too much lately. Dalton, what about you? Where are we at for you?
Like I said, I think at the start of this, with season 1 of any show, you kind of have to give it some leeway because it's still getting its rhythm. And as far as we are in the season 1 goes, there are definitely still some growing pains, and there's definitely still some unactualized potential. But you can sort of see why, especially in 1997, when nothing like this had really been done before, especially not for like that transitioning period from like preteens up through like late teens, where nothing like this had been done before, why it caught on so quickly, and points to Joss Whedon for always being able to give characters compelling and charismatic personalities. That's the one strength that I think without that strength, every show Joss Whedon has ever done probably wouldn't have worked. But it works so well because he can do banter between friends and friend groups like nobody else can, and probably still nobody else can do it quite like Joss Whedon can. Now, granted, he has a very stereotypical way of doing it, and he basically tries to utilize the same formula in every show he has. But if that formula doesn't work, then Disney's going to have to return those $2 billion they made on his Avengers movies, and every show that's ever been made by Joss Whedon is going to have to explain to their fan base that it doesn't work. So it's gotta work for at least a large proportion of people. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here 20 years later.
Yeah, I agree, because up to now, it's been X-Files, and a lot of these kinds of shows were more adult themed. So even if you just go, hey, we're going to take something like the X-Files, or even something older like Kolchak the Night Stalker, we've talked about on here a little bit, and just kind of make teenagers with it, or like Scream. Hey, let's make Scream, but let's make it a weekly thing, and we'll do. I'm okay with that. There's nothing wrong with that. And there is the energy, I agree with you, I think comes not because of the backstory and all the campy stuff. It's the fact that it is a bunch of teenagers talking, and we don't completely hate them. I mean, there's much more hateable teenagers out there. What were we going to say, Pixel?
Oh, no, I was just saying touche to Don.
Yeah,
because,
I agree.
Yeah, and it obviously worked out.
Nothing wrong with some eye candy and some campiness, and as long as you can have fun and understand that's what you're getting into, that's cool. And yeah, so far so good. The old expression in sports is it's not how you start, it's how you finish, which is a bunch of crap. But the point is you do kind of almost remember what your last interaction. So I'm hoping going into the final 2 episodes for season 1 of Buffy that they end strong. So we'll see what happens too. And I'm sure we'll have a master class about those 2 next week. So guys, thanks for joining. Thank Eric and everybody listening. I have to throw it in because I've got a bad feeling about what's going to happen, but that's for next week, gentlemen and ladies and everybody else listening. Hey guys, thanks for showing up, thanks for listening, thanks for getting the word out about it. Buffy's been one of our slightly more popular series that we've been doing lately. We've been consistent with it. I think the 4 of us have enjoyed doing it, so we're going to finish off strong next week, and then we'll see where we're at after that. Guys, thanks for going. As always, good night and stay extreme. Toodles!
Cheers, guys.
So long.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Good night. Stay tuned for a show getting ready to come up here with the team from My Love Comics and the rest of us, the boys on Buffy. Good night.